5 ways to train the boxer's shoulder. Hello everybody, welcome to Boxing Science. In this video, I'm going to be sharing 5 ways to train the boxer's shoulder. Now, the boxer's shoulder is a very important subject and a very problematic area for boxers. Boxers undergo high amounts of volume, high impact forces, and there's a big imbalance between lead and rear shoulder. So let's talk about volume to start off with. This is basically the amount of punches that a boxer throws. You think about like a general kind of boxing session, a boxer can throw anywhere between 500 to 1500 punches every single session because it's very anterior dominant, creates anterior dominance and a lot of tightness through the shoulder. And with this can cause overuse injuries. Also can create some sort of movement limitations, something that we're going to be talking about in this video. Also, you've got to think about the ratio of how many times you'll throw your lead hand to your backhand. So your lead hand is often used a lot more than your rear hand. Think about like some of the combinations that you might throw. Double jab, right hand. Double jab, right hand, left hook. That's a 3-to-1 ratio right there. If you think about how you use your jab for singles, maybe for doubles, not even throwing that rear hand, it's very difficult to say what the ratio is. The more that you think about it, you're looking at like a large ratio between your lead hand and your backhand. Now let's have a think about how you actually throw your lead hand compared to your backhand. With your lead hand, a lot of straight arm shots, maybe a left hook. There's not a lot of rotation, even in them hooks. But in terms of like throwing a jab, it's a very arm dominant movement. You talk to twist to the hips and through the torso as well, but it's not as much a rotation as what supports the backhand. This means that this lead shoulder is getting a lot of action there, and that's why you see a lot of boxers end up getting surgery in their lead shoulder. This causes a lot of shoulder issues, but breaking it down into these 5 ways on how to train the shoulders for boxing will hopefully help you improve your shoulder strength, to help improve punching power, most importantly, to keep your shoulders pain-free and keep you out of the operating theatre. So number 1, in your strength exercises, use landmine. So landmine is a really important exercise to use because boxers are very tight through their overhead range. We've seen this through testing over 150 youth boxers where over 66% demonstrated a limited overhead shoulder range. With this makes overhead pressing a problematic area because soon as an athlete starts overhead pressing, what they'll tend to do is to compensate through an elevation of the shoulder or look to compensate through their lower back. So this will limit the amount of load that's lifted, affect the strength gains from the shoulder, but also will look to compensate and might end up causing injury. We're not wanting to do some overhead pressing. So the landmine press is a fantastic alternative because it's actually activating the anterior and posterior shoulder muscles and the same benefits as an overhead press without going into that compromised position. There's a range of different exercises that we can use. We often start with a half kneeling landmine press. Then we go into standing where we can do increased load. We can use a Viking attachment where we can actually do some more bilateral loading, but we only do this with athletes that are more competent. We're wanting to deal with these unilateral imbalances between left and right, often do like kind of single arm pressing for our upper body. Then can transfer into more dynamic and forceful actions, such as doing the landmine punch and the landmine split jerk. So in general, the landmine is a fantastic tool to help improve shoulder strength and stability, and doing this in a very safe way. There's a lot of things that we need to do to help improve the health of the shoulder, but in general, in terms of like improving your strength, we need to find ways that we can adapt around the limitations that present us with boxers. So landmine, fantastic tool to help improve strength and stability of the shoulder. So we've discussed about the limitations and adapting around them, but we also need to try and improve shoulder mobility. We improve shoulder mobility, we'll improve shoulder health. So the main thing that we need to do is try and improve that overhead range different exercises that we can do there, like a seated overhead press, floor slides, prone TYWs, anything that can help improve the strength and that range through external rotation. We then can look to try and improve the function around the thoracic spine. So we do a lot of kind of rotational exercises, whether that's like a kneeling windmill and rotate, quadruple thoracic rotation, and also seated rotations as well. And then just looking at kind of general shoulder health and mobility, we can do some standing wall rotations. We can do some soft tissue release in terms of like working into the pec, doing anything that we can do to try and open up them shoulders and try and improve general shoulder mobility. And with this will help improve that overhead range. So then you can start implementing some overhead shoulder exercises. So if we've got an athlete that has improved their shoulder strength, improved their overhead range and shoulder mobility, they're now ready to do some sort of overhead pressing. We can do this, but we also have to take a step-by-step approach and be quite cautious with this. So we can do some overhead pressing, but do it in a controlled way. I like to use a half kneeling landmine press because this restricts any kind of contribution from the trunk, whether that's a side bend, whether that's an extension of the spine or a rotation of the spine. Doing it in a half kneeling position gets us to stay in a fixed position, keep the core rigid, and go into that overhead pressing action. If we're doing it just from a standing position with dumbbells, even if this boxer has improved their overhead range, improved their strength, they'll be still limited in terms of the amount of load that they'll be able to lift, and also they'll start looking to compensate through the lower back. Starting it off in a half kneeling position, this is a fantastic start. What I also like to do is an unsupported press, so like from Arnold's position. So Arnold press is where we're having the dumbbells in this position. Unsupported from the back is basically stopping us from flaring up the rib cage. A really good cue to use is to have a foam roller between the legs to stop any kind of side bending or rotation. And this is basically challenging that postural stability and working the posterior shoulder during a pressing action. To start really loading up that overhead range, you can do it from a seated dumbbell press. But again, I'll be looking to make sure that we're doing it from an Arnold position to start off with, or from a neutral position. This is stopping if we go kind of into an external rotation, looking to compensate through the lower back. You've seen it loads of times in the gym, be a keen gym goer, seeing somebody doing really heavy pressing, and you're seeing them just like kind of leaning back whilst doing a shoulder press. Even though we're going in a seated position, we're still wanting the core to be switched on, lower back against that bench. Doing it from an Arnold position will help control and keep that rib cage locked down. And then at the most, go from a neutral position. Again, we're getting that pressing action without any flaring at the rib cage. Now the fourth point, probably the most important point, so I can't believe we've got all the way to number 4. We need to improve the strength of the posterior shoulder. The reason why we need to improve the strength of the posterior shoulder is because thousands of punches, very anterior dominant, with very strong at the front of the shoulders, but not that strong in the back of the shoulders. So we need to improve the strength, the rear delts, and all the muscles around the rotator cuff. So a range of different exercises that we can do. A banded face pull, we can do a banded triple threat, a TRX-T raise, a TRX-Y raise, banded pull apart, and different variations of this. Dumbbell isometric hold, which is working the posterior shoulder. Now, if you are somebody that is actually struggling with shoulder injuries at the moment, you might want to start implementing a few of these exercises, maybe 2 or maybe even 3 exercises per strength and conditioning workout, and also doing it as part of your warm-up as well. Doing some band pull aparts, doing that before a boxing session, strengthening up and activating that posterior shoulder is really important. So all these exercises implemented into your workouts to help improve the strength of the posterior shoulder. And what this basically does is apply the brakes on the punching action. You want to apply the brakes because what will happen if your posterior shoulder isn't working, you end up jolting into these positions, elbows are going. This is going to keep injuring this shoulder area. If we can get these posterior shoulders strong, keep the shoulder in a stronger position whilst we're punching, this is going to be helping improve the strength of the shoulders, strength of your punches, but most importantly, keeping you injury free. So the 5th and final, but by no means least important part of training your shoulder is to challenge stability. Now you think about how fast, how dynamic a punch is, and how stable that your shoulder has to be at the same time. Think about some of your physio-based exercises that you might have done before and how controlled they are and how hard it is to get your shoulders to be stable. Imagine your shoulders trying to be stable through a punching action. Pretty difficult. But this means that we need to train that. So we can do that in a range of different ways. We can go very physio-based, where we're working kind of like external rotation, some sort of med ball passes, Swiss ball figure of eights. And this is challenging stability in a very physio-based way. And sometimes this is often needed. You can do it through kind of loading strategies, doing like some sort of plank variations, whether you're doing a plank shoulder tap, a hand elevated plank shoulder tap, plank side walks, and maybe even like a kettlebell drag, challenging that shoulder stability and core stability at the same time. So it's really beneficial. You can also do it through like some sort of pressing exercises, such as the chaotic overhead press. We're adding the weight load on a overhead pressing action, but we're doing this with bands. Bands creates a chaotic environment to be able to control at the top, and basically the posterior shoulder muscles having to switch on and off to be able to create that stability. A fantastic exercise to use as well is a kettlebell bottoms up press. It's also challenging grip strength as well. It really relies on some solid shoulder stability to be able to control that variable load overhead. Using the chaotic overhead press, using the bottoms up kettlebell press, fantastic exercises to help improve shoulder stability for boxing. Okay guys, so there are my 5 top tips for training the shoulders for boxing. Very complicated area, but hopefully I've given you some useful and basic tools to start implementing into your strength and conditioning workouts. If you've got any questions about any of the topics raised, comment in the comment box below. If you're interested in any of our strength and conditioning programs, you can check them out at boxingscience.co.uk. And also, if you're not a subscriber yet, hit the subscribe button. So 1, you don't miss out on any future content, but 2, you help grow the channel so we can provide even bigger and better content for you. So thank you very much for watching this video. Hopefully see you on the next video at Boxing Science.